I've always despised the frequent gatherings at the local country club. Every few weeks, there seemed to be a new pretext for holding a fancy party just so a bunch of wealthy people could brag and stroke their egos. Daisy, my wife, was always looking forward to these gatherings. Her drinking had gotten out of control during the last year or two, and she had embarrassed both herself and me at times. Daisy and I had been married for 24 years, and our 3 children were in college. We originally met while I was working on my MBA, and we hit it off immediately, but approximately 10 years ago, things began to chill between us. I assumed it was just part of getting older. However, I missed the affection and connection we formerly shared. I didn't push it, though. Instead, I simply accepted that romance might not be part of our future. Nonetheless, my profession was enjoyable, and I earned enough money to support our family, despite the financial burden of sending the children to college. Daisy did not function. She was more concerned with her community activities and social life. She lived on my wages, so I had to keep everything fiscally solid. Despite her hectic lifestyle, I noted she always appeared well-groomed, most likely due to her many visits to spas and salons. Meanwhile, I was relatively normal, with a bit of a belly and graying hair, but I dressed sharp primarily because of my job and Daisy's love of shopping. I was good at my job, but I wasn't completely satisfied. I wanted something greater than a paycheck. I also desired a change of scenery. Our house became too large for just the 2 of us, and I despised the upkeep, costs, and effort required to maintain it. Daisy, however, refused to consider transferring. She enjoyed our huge house and her country club buddies. One night, at one of those unending meetings, I went around the club, conversing with folks about nothing significant. I felt distant, especially as the night wore on. I hesitated over my last drink while Daisy continued her normal heavy drinking. She was speaking with a group of local women, and as I walked by, I noticed their conversation shift to more personal topics. I decided to softly back away. Daisy's voice became more audible as I was about to leave. Hell, without Jacob Wallace, I would not have had any decent sex in my life. I froze. The group's sudden stillness indicated that they had all seen me nearby, caught off guard. Daisy turned to face me, her cheeks flushed from the drinks. "Oh, Morris," she slurred. "I didn't realize you were still here. You were not supposed to hear that." "My fault," she replied, giggling like a schoolgirl. The women surrounding her shuffled uncomfortably. Some discreetly left, while others lingered there, unsure what to do. Daisy gave me a sly look, evidently too drunk to know the damage she'd done. I put down my glass and departed the club at a relaxed pace. Instead of returning home, I went to the airport and was on my way to Colorado Springs in less than 30 minutes. I had always preferred it over Vegas, and while there, I began to reflect more carefully on my relationship with Daisy. A weekend getaway promised some much-needed clarity. I turned off my phone and checked into a casino hotel, effortlessly acquiring a room after depositing $20,000. One thing I liked about casino accounts: they were not subject to federal reporting requirements, whereas large winnings had to be recorded. Deposits were almost invisible. I didn't gamble much, but I respected their system. I got up late on Saturday about noon and sat down for a burger and fries. While strolling by the nearby river, I considered my circumstances and how many marriages end. I wasn't planning a hasty divorce in Colorado Springs yet, but I was flirting with the thought of throwing my wedding ring into the river on my way back to the hotel. I passed a real estate office with condo images in the window. The prospect of purchasing a home here began to make sense. After an hour at the office and a couple of hours driving around, I saw a little furnished unit that felt appropriate. The main issue was purchasing it while still married. So I organized a lease-to-purchase agreement with a substantial down payment. Taking charge of our finances early in our marriage was one of the best moves I'd ever made. Daisy had no sense of financial responsibility and left all of the expenses to me while she loved spending. That night, I treated myself to a wonderful sushi meal and added another $10,000 to the casino's account. Even though I disliked the cash advance fees, they were a modest price to pay. The next morning, I got up early to prepare a big meal of eggs, bacon, and hash browns. My waitress, a woman in her mid-40s, drew my attention with a prominent black eye. Her name tag indicated that she attempted to conceal her appearance with makeup. But when I inquired if that was her real name, she smiled and answered, "No, Diana, but Dina is the closest tag they had." I asked her to bring me another cup of coffee and offered her a large gratuity if she told me the story behind her black eye. She grinned and responded, "How about I give you a refill and you leave a smaller tip without asking any further questions?" I chuckled and agreed. Since I already had the keys to the condo, I spent the remainder of the day gathering necessities such as clothes, groceries, and basic supplies to begin setting up. I also purchased a beat-up old sedan for errands, knowing I'd be returning frequently enough that renting wasn't worthwhile. By the end of the day, I'd opened accounts at 4 different casinos and deposited approximately $660,000 in total. I kept track of everything in a small notebook, even though I hadn't gambled a dollar. I knew I could pay for the condo down payment in 6 months. Not an issue. By evening, I was starving, so I returned to the casino restaurant. Dina. Diana was there again, pulling a double shift. "Still here?" I said. She grumbled and told me she needed to work more hours because her rent was greater than intended. We made light talk, and when she presented the check, she paused for a bit. "I apologize for what happened earlier. I'm still adjusting to this area, and I'm a little self-conscious about my eye. It's a parting gift from my husband after I discussed divorce, but maybe it will be the last. Thank you again for the wonderful gratuity this morning." It was quite helpful, she added, and her sad grin stayed with me that night as I reflected on it. I understood there wasn't much else I could do right now. I needed to go home and take care of a few things before deciding on my future moves. It was simple enough to book a flight back, but I wasn't sure what to do once I arrived there. The next morning, Diana was still serving at the cafe, and I was able to sit at one of her tables. After finishing my dinner, I approached her. I explained my problem and asked for your assistance. "I'm leaving tonight and won't be returning for approximately a week, maybe longer. I need someone to care over my condo while I'm away. It's a 2-bedroom home, so you'll have plenty of space. Could you assist me out? It would last at least a few months." She blinked, obviously astonished. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Yeah, no strings attached. I just detest the thought of keeping it empty for so long. Most of the time, you will be the only one there, and when I'm around, I'll keep out of your way. Promise?" Diana appeared uncertain. I was probably scared that this was a trap, but I didn't have time to go into depth. I handed her the condo and car keys. "The location is not far from here, and I'm leaving my car for you to use. It's a blue Ford Focus. It is always pumped up and ready. I'll phone ahead when I'm returning. The telephone has an answering machine. If I cannot reach you." She hesitated, holding the keys and a napkin on which I had written the property address. "If you're not comfortable with it, don't worry. I'll just pick up the keys when I go back next Friday." I soothed her with that, then gathered my belongings and headed to the airport. As much as I wanted to stay in Colorado Springs, I needed to return home. I retrieved my automobile from the long-term parking lot. I drove by the house. Daisy's car was not present, so I hastily packed a few items for the week, including clothes, my laptop, passport, and birth certificate. It did not take long. Fortunately, my employment provided me access to some kitchenette-style apartments, so I reserved one for the following few weeks. I contacted my eldest son, Bob, to explain what was going on. "Your mother and I are currently going through a difficult time, therefore I will be unavailable for some time," I explained. "Tell your sisters not to worry, okay?" All 3 kids attended Penn State, and while the out-of-state tuition was expensive, I could afford it. I hung up the phone, charged it, and took a fast shower. I had not eaten much on the flight, only a bag of peanuts. So I was looking forward to having a decent supper. Monday struck me like a freight train before anything else. I went immediately to the bank and got a large second mortgage on the house that well outweighed its existing value. By the end of the month, everything would have changed. From there, I phoned Penn State and prepaid tuition for all three of my children, transferring nearly $240,000 to the university. That left me with just over $200,000 in cashier's checks, which I intended to take back to Colorado Springs. I cashed out a few CDs, paid the penalties, and closed my money market account. I left the credit cards alone, assuming I would deal with them at the end of the month. I was already late for work when I arrived, but my secretary Amy greeted me with black coffee and a knowing smile. "Good morning, Mr. Barnes. So are you going to tell me what really happened at the country club on Friday? Should I just continue with the rumors?" "The rumors are true, Amy. What more should you know?" I responded without skipping a beat. "So, what do you need me to do?" she asked, eager to join in. "Find out all you can about Jacob Wallace. I suppose he used to work here, but I'm not certain. We also have the staff handle my weekly schedule and ensure that any meetings or appointments I've scheduled do not change. Have you got all of that?" As she exited the room, Amy smiled broadly and gave me a thumbs up. What I had expected to take weeks to resolve now appears to be solvable in a matter of days. I called my lawyer, Chris, and booked an appointment right before I left. I made it obvious to Amy that I would neither accept or return any calls from my wife. I also told security not to allow her inside the building. Chris had never liked Daisy, making him the ideal candidate to handle the divorce. I was at the country club on Friday. "Morris, I think I understand why you're here," he said. "You're correct," I replied. "I figured I could live with it as long as it wasn't public. However, on Friday, things changed. Okay, men, I'll need access to all of your accounts under a couple of powers of attorney. My assistant will prepare the documents, and I'll contact you when they're ready. Is there anything more I should know?" "Well, Chris, I admit that I've developed a gambling habit. I spent the weekend in Colorado Springs and lost a big amount. I'm returning this weekend, and I'm scared things may grow worse." Chris grinned. "That's rough, man. I hope you are keeping track of his loses." "I am," I nodded, "and I will mail you copies. We shouldn't discuss this any further." "Agreed. Is there anything else you require from me?" "Nope. I'm good for now." "Thanks," I remarked as I grabbed the financial worksheet he offered me as I walked out. I realized I'd skipped lunch. Back at the office, Amy had already acquired some information about Jacob Wallace. She suggested I speak with Joanna Curtis at HR before going. Joanna was a commanding figure, usually dressed in professional suits and maintaining a close bond, which added to her intimidating presence. If Amy thought it was vital for me to meet with her, I figured I should do so. "Good afternoon, Mr. Barnes. Please take a seat," she greeted me, hoping to make me feel at ease, but it didn't work. It was like sitting down with a harsh teacher, despite the fact that I was a grown man in a senior position. She shut the door and spoke again. Amy filled me in on the situation. I do not participate in office gossip. I simply deal with facts. 3 years ago, Jacob Wallace approached me with some personal disclosures, and I pledged to keep them private. But now, I can't honor my vow. If something I say offends you, you can leave, and I will not continue. But I'm only giving the facts. Do you understand, Mr. Barnes? "Yes, I understand," I responded. "I can handle whatever you're about to tell me." "Well, she started 3.5 years ago. Your wife, Daisy, approached Jacob at a corporate event. There was a lot of drinking that night, and before the celebration ended, people were doing inappropriate things in one of the private offices. Jacob was set to marry the following month, but your wife threatened to reveal the affair to his fiancée if he stopped seeing her. Jacob had anticipated Daisy would back off when he got married, but she didn't. She pressed him into more affairs for months, using the danger of revealing their secret as leverage. Jacob, desperate, eventually turned to me for assistance. He needed to tell me everything. Of course. Ethically, I couldn't tell anyone, not even you. The greatest answer I could think of was to move Jacob to another office. Daisy ceased harassing him until he relocated to Fort Worth. Jacob never told his wife what had transpired. Have you got any questions?" Jacob appeared to have been as much of a victim as everyone else in this disaster. Initially, I considered vengeance, but now it seemed needless. "Do you have any advice, Miss Curtis? Now that you know the whole story, I recommend you let it go. Jacob is a valuable employee, and you should not jeopardize his career over something your wife initiated," she said. "We appreciate your time." I agree. I said that being put into that circumstance with my wife was sufficient punishment. As we rose up, Joanna grinned and said, "By the way, it is not Miss. I have been married for 32 years. It was difficult to image Joanna in a romantic environment with anyone, but I soon dismissed those thoughts. I had more essential things to focus on. Amy had cleared my calendar for the remainder of the day, and despite my wife's constant calls, I stood fast in my decision not to speak with her. Amy had scheduled an appointment with the business president for the next day, and I had a meeting with the legal department later that afternoon. I even invited Amy to dinner, but she graciously declined, joking that her husband would not approve. She teased me, telling me to ask Joanna out instead. The meeting with the legal department dragged on, so I had to keep several employees working late. I apologized, and they understood. It wasn't easy to figure out my retirement plan for a cash payout. Closing our joint savings account was simple, but it took time to complete. Sorting out my sick leave, vacation pay, and business insurance was simple in comparison to everything else, but by this point it was evident I'd be leaving the company shortly. I just hope my wife doesn't find out before I get everything in place. That night, I ate dinner alone, and my thoughts turned to Diana. I wondered if she had moved into the condo and was still working double shifts. Despite hardly knowing her, I found myself excited to return to Colorado Springs and see her. I recognized how silly that was and attempted to brush it off. It was silly to speculate about something that could never happen. The following morning, I cashed out 2 whole life insurance plans and canceled a few term policies. I was shocked at how much cash the whole life policies had accumulated. I scheduled to pick up the checks the next day. My auto insurance was covered by my work. I terminated Daisy's Lexus insurance, since the lease was in her name, before going to the office. I dropped by Jasper's house, handed him the financial documents, and signed a few more papers. His secretary had prepared. Back at work, Amy greeted me with my normal coffee. "Not to add to your difficulties, but you should speak with Calvin. Bask in settlements before meeting with Richard," she advised. Richard Ryder, the company's president, most likely already knew why I was there. In contrast to the other departments that benefited from sunlight and windows, the settlements department was tucked down in the basement, where I had set up. Calvin wasn't one for chatter, but he always got the job done efficiently. "Hey, Calvin, Amy mentioned that you wanted to chat to me." I greeted him. He escorted me to a quiet area and stated, "I've heard some rumblings about things in your office. I'm not one to spread rumors, but I felt you should know. About 6 years ago, we had a guy named Raymond Scott working here. He was a decent man, married with children. He became involved with your wife following an office event. She would not leave him alone. I kept contacting him at both home and work. He tried to end it, but she threatened to inform his wife. He called her bluff, and 2 days later, his wife kicked him out. He lost his job, started drinking, and I'm not sure where he is today. Your wife allegedly bribed his wife $10,000 to remain silent. I don't have any hard evidence for that. Thank you, Calvin." "Thank you for telling me," I said, feeling both angry and resigned. Amy had been correct to send me to him. I took the elevator up to the 9th floor for my meeting with Richard Ryder. Even though I arrived early, he greeted me right away. The meeting proceeded quickly and directly. He informed me that the legal and payroll departments would handle everything for me. After everything was settled, I was to contact him personally wherever I went. He gave me a business card with his personal number on the back. No apologies and no regrets. Just business. When I returned to the workplace, Amy greeted me with a smile and my regular cup of coffee. "Boss, you've got a situation. she remarked, gesturing toward the window. Daisy was arguing with a security guard when I looked down in the parking lot. She's been down there for 20 minutes, Amy said. They're not letting her in, and she won't leave. What would you like to do? The guards appear to have the situation under control, I said, feeling indifferent. The only thing I need now is someone to eat supper with. I detest eating alone. I called Jasper to check on things. He said he couldn't take any further action until I sorted out the funds. For the time being, I was still financially secure with money in the bank and checks coming in. I told him that I'd be returning to Colorado Springs early and wouldn't be back until I was completely broke. Every now and again, someone would come into my office and inform me that my wife was attempting to reach me. She had even instructed her acquaintances to call their spouses to find me. I remained in the office for a few more hours, organizing things to make the transition smoother for my replacement. As I drove away, I observed Daisy on the bonnet of my car, waiting for me. Amy grins as she hands over the keys to her Honda Civic. My husband is picking me up for dinner so you can use my car, she explained. You aren't planning anything insane in Fort Worth, are you? Nope. Just tying up the loose ends. No vengeance, I reassured her. I had dinner in Allentown and returned to my flat before midnight. The next morning went by in a whirl. I signed more paperwork for Jasper, closed all of his bank accounts, canceled his credit cards, and even made arrangements to turn off the house's electricity. I picked up checks from a bank inside the insurance firm, and toward the end, I was amazed at how much I was worth. I acquired a new phone and canceled the ones Daisy and I were using. I even sold my country club membership for $23,000 to a longtime buddy. My replacement had already established into the office. He seemed like a pleasant enough guy, and he had just relocated down from Boston with only 24 hours' notice. Amy understood more about operating the facility than I ever did, so there wasn't much training required. There were a few things in the house I hoped I could take with me, but nothing was worth returning for. Amy instructed me to keep her car, and her husband would pick it up at the airport. I packed my possessions, purchased a couple of inexpensive suitcases, and assumed I could get everything else I needed in Colorado Springs. It hit me suddenly. I'd completed what I needed to do. All of my assets were now liquid. There are no stocks or accounts, only cash and the house. I was preparing to go for Daisy. The airline was courteous and pushed up my flight without incident. I called Jasper at home. I just wanted to let you know I am going tonight. You're all sitting on your end, I asked. Yep. Bob, I have everything ready. I can serve the papers tomorrow, but I need the financial information right away. Go ahead and hand her the documents. I said, I'll start sending proof of her financial irresponsibility shortly. Be careful. Jasper, I do not want either of us in hot water. We will do. Bob, safe travels. I called the condo and left a message informing Diana that I'd be back later that night. I wasn't sure if she would be there, but I'm hoping so. It seemed funny given how little I knew about her, but I was hoping for some sort of relationship, even if it was only friendship. Her fragility made me apprehensive about taking advantage of the circumstance. I arrived in Fort Worth early enough to enjoy a leisurely brunch. I was sitting in Jacob Wallace's office when he came in, visibly upset. Mr. Barnes, I'd say it's good to see you, but that's a lie, and we both know it, he said. Relax, Jacob. I'm not here to discipline you. I just wanted to let you know that I understand what occurred and have no hard feelings. He said, You could have told me that over the phone. I could have, but I decided it was worth my time to settle the matter in person. I don't understand it. Why bother? I botched up. I should apologize to you. You are not fully to blame. The most of the issue was generated by my wife. I'm not excusing what you did, but I don't want you to carry more guilt than necessary. You have already gone through enough. Jacob glanced at me, speechless for a time. Thank you for expressing it that way. I'm unsure how to answer. I reached over and gave him one of Jasper's business cards. Give my attorney a call immediately. He may require your assistance, but all information will remain confidential. He may not even require anything from you, but a notarized declaration stating what occurred will suffice. It will not go to your wife, I promise. We shook hands and parted ways. As I stood up, I realized how weird the gesture felt given Jacob's role in my wife's treachery. But it felt right. He was a decent man who did not deserve to have his life devastated by a mistake, especially one that happened often. An hour later, I was on a jet back to Sparks, contemplating where everything had gone wrong. I had worked extensively to provide for my family, and I thought I had done well. However, while I ensured that everyone was taken care of, I had inadvertently disregarded my wife in instances like this. People prefer to look for where they went wrong. Most of the time, I can see flaws in myself and accept them. But Daisy's infidelity was something I could not justify or forgive. If she'd been more discreet, perhaps I would have accepted the responsibility and gone on. But her lack of caution, her apparent disrespect, removed any sense of shame I could have had. The evening concluded on a nicer note than I had anticipated. When I arrived to Sparks Tahoe International, I was shocked to see Diana waiting at baggage claim. She was dressed in jeans and a light blue shirt, which was very different from the uniform. I was used to seeing her in the diner. I didn't ask her to pick me up. I just wanted to let her know I was back in town. "Good evening, Diana. I did not expect to see you here," I said. "I thought I had your car. That was the least I could do. Aren't you working tonight?" "Nope. Your excellent offer allowed me to reduce the number of shifts I worked." "Oh, I was not trying to be generous," I baited, hoping for an excuse to get you alone. "And what exactly do you intend to do once you have me alone?" she inquired with a cheeky smirk. "I haven't thought that far ahead yet. Any suggestions?" As I gathered my baggage, I noticed her cheeks flush slightly. It was a sign that I should calm down because I didn't want to scare her off. Nonetheless, her playful response was a positive indication. We returned to the flat 30 minutes later, and it was clear that she felt at ease enough to joke with me. Diana had taken the opportunity of adorning the space with some little but thoughtful touches that greatly enhanced the atmosphere. As a thank you, I treated us to prime rib dinners. Diana appeared to appreciate the wine more than the food. "How is the divorce going?" she asked. I admitted that it wasn't excellent. "I still have 3 weeks before I can even file. You'll need 6 weeks of residency here. And despite what everyone says, I assumed it would be simpler. Perhaps I should have addressed it at home." "Why haven't you?" Diana inquired, looking up from her meal. "I needed to leave Daisy more than I needed a divorce. Actually, it's simply a sheet of paper. Leaving was the most crucial aspect." She spoke quietly. Her remarks hit a chord with me. I'd been so focused on Daisy's divorce. But did it really matter? I hadn't planned on getting married again. The rest of the evening was filled with lighter talk, movies and books, hobbies. Diana did not have any children, and I did not ask for further information. We spent the night sleeping in different bedrooms, and when I woke up, Diana had already departed for work. Fresh coffee was all I needed. I was still full from the night before, so I went into the shower and started straight to work. "Jasper, how is my favorite lawyer doing?" I asked on the phone. I heard a sigh from the other end. "Not great, Maurice. I have some awful news, and I need you to agree not to shoot the messenger." "What happens now?" I groaned. "I've only been gone for a day." "What happened?" "Daisy is making waves." She found out about the bank accounts and other details. She contacted the police and obtained a restraining order on practically everything. "All of your accounts are frozen, even empty ones. You are not permitted to approach either her or the house, and despite the fact that the children are adults, you are not permitted to remove anything from the residence or contact them. Most of it is nonsense, but it will take time and money to weed through, and she has reported you to the SEC, so they are now digging into your retirement savings." I sighed heavily. Jasper, I am done with this. I no longer want any part of it. Do you understand? I got it, Morris, but I have to warn you. She has also hired a private detective to track you down. I'm not sure how she's paying for all of this, but remember that if the authorities inquire where you are, I'll have to tell them. I cannot compromise my career. I understand, Jasper. Take care of yourself. I will make changes on my end, and you will not hear from me for a bit. This certainly complicates matters, I thought as I hung up. Even the best-laid plans can fail in an instant. My ingenious plan of claiming to lose all my money at the casinos was now out of the question. Fortunately, Diana had left me the car. I was not sure how she got to work, but that was the least of my problems at the time. I still had a duffel bag filled with cash and checks to deal with. I went to 6 different casinos, cashed the checks, and exchanged them for chips or credit. I didn't want to risk going to the bank and having my accounts blacklisted. In contrast, the casinos were eager to assist. By the end of the morning, I'd deposited everything in multiple locations and had a bag full of cash and chips. After a quick lunch, I began withdrawing funds within 2 hours. All of the chips had been changed back into cash, and I had successfully withdrawn the entire amount from my casino accounts. I now have a sizable chunk of cash and no problems thus far. It took me nearly an hour to drive to Henderson, where I hired a huge safety deposit box from a small, unassuming bank. I saved everything but $55,000 for unexpected expenses. Feeling relieved, I was looking forward to another supper with Diana to celebrate. However, as soon as I walked into the condo, I sensed something was wrong. Diana was hurrying to fix items that did not appear to have been disturbed. She looked up at me. Her hand was covering part of her face. I apologize, Maurice. It is my fault. I didn't notice he was following me until I reached the flat, she said quietly, gently. I removed her hand to discover a new black eye, swollen lip, and a massive bruise on her cheek. Was this Oscar? I asked. She nodded. He has 2 brothers with him. They are all seeking for you right now. Oscar warned me not to leave the condominium. Where are they? Searching? I asked. I provided them the names of several casinos. They're not sure what you look like, but they're not thinking clearly. It was obvious we couldn't stay, and calling the cops was not an option. We left everything behind and headed west, staying overnight at a little off-road motel in Auburn. Despite the fact that there was only 1 bed, I made an effort to show respect. I got Diana some takeaway and makeup, but despite her attempts, the bruises remained apparent. She apologized several times throughout the night, and I was relieved when she eventually fell asleep. The following day, we headed to Folsom to purchase clothing and personal stuff. I didn't know when we'd be able to return to the condo, so I booked the motel for 2 additional nights. Diana and I spent the next few days getting to know each other better. There was no closeness or flirting, only company. After just 3 days, I felt more at ease with her than I had with Daisy. Even after 24 years of marriage, when I wasn't with Diana, I was concerned that everything was falling apart. I couldn't bring her back to Sparks because Oscar was hunting for her, and I didn't feel safe returning. I had left behind critical items. My laptop, passport, and other paperwork are in the condominium. Foolishly, I felt compelled to return for them. Have you ever traveled to Mexico? I asked Diana one afternoon. No, I have not. Are we heading to Mexico? She responded. Her voice was riddled with apprehension. I am not sure yet. But if things go wrong, I need you to do something for me. I don't want you to be wounded because of me. Maurice, you do not owe me anything. You've already done so much for me, she explained. I have a lot of money tucked away, and it's clean. But if something happens to me, I'll need you to retrieve it. If I can't make it, go to San Luis Potosi and wait for me. Use whatever you need till I arrive. How are you going to find me? She asked. Every morning, head to the Mercado Hidalgo for coffee. It's a large area, but I'll locate you. When should I do it? When you understand I am in trouble, not before. I replied strongly. Why not leave now? She pressed. I disregarded the question and assured her we were going together when the time arrived. 2 hours later, we crossed the pass back to Henderson. I put Diana's name on the safety deposit box and handed her a key. We returned to the condo, but I parked a short distance down the street. The building had an open yet covered parking lot underneath it. I advised Diana to wait in the car while I checked for any problems inside. What kind of issue? She asked. I'm not sure, but given recent events, anything is possible, I said as I walked into the parking lot. I heard a voice say, Morris Barnes, turn around. Behind me stood a wiry man dressed in a long leather coat. He appeared more uncomfortable than dangerous, but the revolver in his palm compensated for that. Do we know one another? When I asked, a grin spread across his face, indicating that he was proud to divulge his identity. I'm Luke. Your wife sent it to me. All right, what do you want? I need the wedding ring in your wallet, the ring I received. But why the wallet? To make it appear like a robbery? Luke spoke rather nonchalantly. Your wife has paid me to take you out. I hope she paid you beforehand because she is broke. What do you mean? He inquired, his confidence wavering before I could respond. 3 big men wearing long leather coats emerged from the darkness. Morris Barnes, we need to speak with you, one of them shouted clearly. Oscar. Luke, caught off guard, recognized their weapons and swiftly went for his own. In the chaos, I vaulted over the concrete barrier, leaving them to figure it out as I sprinted alongside the building for the automobile. Gunfire boomed against the garage walls. Looking up, I noticed Diana sprinting down the street as 2 men in suits emerged from a black SUV nearby. They appeared to be federal agents, most likely awaiting my arrival. The gunfight in the garage provided just enough of a distraction for me to escape unnoticed. Diana and the automobile were long gone, and there was no way I was returning to that condo. I didn't care who was hit in the parking garage. All I knew was that 3 distinct organizations were pursuing me, each for their own reasons. It was clear I needed to go underground for a bit. I had almost $4,000 in cash, but going to Henderson to get it from the safety deposit box was not an option. I was too hot right now, and I knew it. It's funny how things had gotten out of hand. I was merely attempting to get away from a betraying wife. Where had everything gone wrong? Why? A Daisy attempted to have me killed. Perhaps she didn't realize there was no more insurance payout. I suppose I misjudged her intelligence, which was my error. I boarded the bus to San Jose. $1,000 doesn't go far in that city, but it was enough to get me a new identity, social security number, identification, and all. I rented a small room with shared amenities and landed a job as a server at a quiet hole-in-the-wall restaurant. After a month or so, I was earning enough to cover my expenditures. I was even getting better at waiting tables. Some regulars began to inquire for me. I have let my old phone service lapse. I didn't need it anyway. It merely costs a few dollars to purchase a prepaid phone with 50 minutes of speak time. I wanted to contact Diana but didn't know where she was. So instead, I called Jasper. Hey, Jasper, this is Maurice. Just checking in. Maurice, it's fantastic to hear from you. Things have settled down, but not in the way you might think. Where are you now? None of your concern, I said. When we last spoke, I had a slew of nasty folks chasing me. Are I still on the hit list? Not really. Jasper stated that most of the mess has been straightened up, particularly after Daisy's arrest. The IRS is still hounding you about the 401k, but everything else is looking well. Wait, what? Daisy was arrested? Yeah. I assumed you would have known. Have you heard of a guy named Lucas? Luke? Yeah. I met him a few months ago. He attempted to kill me, but several other guys intervened, and as they debated about who would perform the job, I slipped away. What is his deal? Daisy hired him to take you out. Luke was seriously injured in sparks and ended up telling the cops about the entire operation. Daisy apparently stiffed him on a $10,000 contract, which made him squeal. The cops truly believed his story. Daisy is currently in jail, awaiting trial. She cannot make bail. Jasper, if she hadn't tried to kill me, I'd think about aiding her. I don't really care whether her parents bail her out. I will see what I can do. But listen, no one is looking for you right now. Do you want me to restart the divorce process? We have good grounds this time. Might as well, I replied. However, it will clean things up. Honestly, I'm past caring. Use the papers. You already have. Oh, one more thing, Jasper explained. Daisy got into trouble and all of your kids came home. They were concerned at first, but as they discovered the reality, they lost interest. They want you to reach out and let them know you're fine. I'll do it soon. How did my money laundering scheme turn out? Not excellent. You lost control and lost contact. You'll need to work it out next week. Thank you, Jasper. Stay in touch. Before I hung up, I needed to ask, did Daisy ever explain why she wanted me dead? Nope, but I assumed it was for insurance. She had no idea you had canceled it. I called to reassure the kids that everything was fine. They felt better knowing their tuition was paid in advance, but they were still curious about Daisy's situation. I couldn't bring myself to tell them everything, so I omitted the nasty details. A few days later, I borrowed a car and headed to Henderson. I opened the safety deposit box and it was empty. Diane had not left a note or anything. I couldn't be mad because I had given her access to it. Had she moved to San Luis Potosi or found a better hiding place somewhere out of my reach? There was only one way of finding out. In my San Jose area, there were several small travel agencies, the most of which catered to group excursions. I didn't fit into any of their packages, but I was able to secure a last-minute seat on a tour to Mexico. It was the first time in a long time that I had to cobble together enough funds for something. The trip was inexpensive, but I didn't have much money. I felt a little more at peace knowing that several of the guys from the restaurant were on the same journey. I spent the first 2 days wandering about San Luis Potosi's Mercado Hidalgo, trying to spot Diana. The space was considerably larger than I had anticipated, and it was beginning to feel like a poor idea. I hated to think about it, but Diana might have took the money and fled to a faraway place, such as Thailand or Bali. There was enough money in that deposit box to support a comfortable lifestyle anywhere in the world. I wasn't sure if I should keep looking for her or give up and wait until the 3rd day. I was just about to give up. I heard a familiar voice. It's about time. Maurice, where were you? I turned around to see Diana. She had her hands on her hips and was wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat with crimson band. Without thinking, I walked over to kiss her. I'm not sure why I hadn't done it sooner, but I was relieved I did. That's a pretty weak first kiss, she said. Try again. The second kiss ended with a hug, and I lifted her off the ground. Diana, I've missed you so much. You will have to tell me what you have been up to. We can speak later. Right now. Let us get some food, she said, grasping my hand. We walked through the market. Hand in hand, for the first time in a long time, I felt pleased and comfortable. Maurice, don't be mad, but I spent some of your money. The majority of it is in the bank, but I bought us a home. I hope you do not mind. She spoke a little sheepishly. With so much money in the bank? A house sounds ideal, I answered. The house she purchased was a gorgeous hacienda in a beautiful city, and I was with a fantastic woman. I could not have asked for more. Meanwhile, Daisy's parents were able to bail her out and pay her legal bills. Jasper quickly persuaded her to sign the divorce papers, and she received a 5 to 8 year term for plotting to murder me. What is the strangest part? Jacob Wallace had given Jasper a deposition, but he never had to use it. Jasper also found Ray Scott, who was sober but still battling. When I inquired how I could help him, he stated he needed a hot dog pushcart, so I purchased him one for $2,400. The IRS paid with me for $4,000, and Luke was now in a Nevada prison, along with Diana's ex-husband and his brothers. With my legal issues resolved, I was free to return to my prior employment. Better, a promotion awaited me. We planned to marry when Diana's divorce was finalized in Mexico. The kids were ecstatic and had even purchased their wedding tickets. During spring break, the house in San Luis Potosi was stunning. We didn't intend to live there forever. Diana and I agreed it would be an ideal vacation home. Amy was overjoyed when I returned to work, especially since my promotion represented a step up for her. Diana was open to where we would live as long as we were together. She even wanted to meet Daisy, which promised to be a fascinating experience. Things didn't go precisely as planned, but I didn't have anything to complain about. Here's the next story. I usually get home earlier from work than Tina, so I had plenty of time to prepare. Naturally, once I was prepared, I needed to kill some time until she arrived home. As soon as I heard the garage door open, I took one final glance in the bathroom mirror, fixed my tie, and walked downstairs. I could not have asked for a better position. Tina was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking at me as I descended. She spotted the suit and tie and commented, "I didn't realize we were going somewhere tonight." "We are not." "Why are you dressed like that if we aren't going anywhere?" "Because I am heading out." "What's happening?" "Billy, I've got a date. I would love to talk, but I am running late. I don't know when I'll be returning, so don't wait for me." "Do you have a date? With whom?" By this point, I had arrived at the front door. As I unlocked it, I heard, "One damn minute, William, we need to." And I stepped outside, locking the door before hearing the remainder of what she said. Fortunately, the extended cab pickup did not fit in the garage, so she had less time to approach me. Furthermore, I believe she was taken off guard and in shock by what was happening, which slowed her down little. By the time she got outside, she was saying, "Damn it, Billy, get your ass back here." I was already inside the truck, with the engine going. I just grinned as I backed out of the driveway, turned left, and drove to the condominium where my date for the evening lived. I believe a little backstory is necessary here. I met Tina Marie Clausen in my final year at Metropolitan State University. My major was business management, and I was taking a course on analyzing managerial decisions. The classroom was filled, and the only available seat was next to mine. The professor entered the room at the same moment as a young woman, who took the single open seat. I know that most people, at least those I know, believe that love at first sight is a figurative expression, and that such a thing does not exist. But my first sight at her made me believe she was the one. I hadn't even spoken to her yet, and I was immediately thinking if I had enough money to buy her an engagement ring. She sat down, glanced at me, and said, "Good morning," and I assumed that was it. But before I could react, Bivens called the class to order. I don't think I heard half of what he said during the session, because the dark-haired beauty sitting next to me had almost completely caught my attention. When the session concluded, I closely followed the girl, and owing to Bivens's roll call, I recognized her name as Tina. Once in the hallway, I tapped her on the shoulder to catch her attention, and when she turned to face me, I introduced myself as Bill Dalton. I know this should happen in a more romantic setting, but I don't want to waste time. "Will you marry me?" She chuckled and answered, "I'm not sure if I'll say yes or no, but I might just consider you and agree to a date if I'm properly asked." "Are you free tonight?" As it turns out, I am. "What about having supper with me this evening? I think I'd enjoy that." We discovered that we had both finished our classes at 11:45, so we decided to meet at the student cafeteria for lunch. Over lunch, I discovered that I had never seen her on campus before because she had previously attended a local college and was in her first semester at Metro. We exchanged information, and I discovered that she was an only child with both parents working. She was studying in accounting with the goal of becoming a certified public accountant, or CPA. Her favorite color was blue, and she enjoyed practically all types of music except what she called noise, or rap. She refused to recognize it as music. She discovered that I, too, was an only child and was studying business management in preparation to take over the family firm. When my father finally chose to retire, I didn't have a favorite color, but I agreed with her thoughts on rap. We decided that I would pick her up at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we would both go to our classes. Our date went fine, however, she did laugh at me quite a bit. Mostly, I believe, because she didn't take me seriously when I asked her ring size and what type of engagement ring she would want. I also asked her what she wanted from a wedding and whether we should wait until we both finished school before getting married. As I drove her home, I told her how serious I was when I first saw you. I knew you were the person I was supposed to be with. Let's face it, fate, karma, or whatever is in charge made sure you were in the same class as me and the sole empty seat in the room was right next to mine. We were intended to be together, and you need to admit that you're being stupid. We barely know one another. That's why we should keep seeing each other, so you can discover all about me. I've already told my parents that I've met their future daughter-in-law, and they're excited to meet you. How about we have supper with them on Friday? I do not think so. You're moving a little too quickly for me. That's because I know we are destined to be together, and I want to keep developing our lives together. Well, you could be certain, but I am not, until I get to know you much better. I am not agreeing to anything. You are charming, and I like your persistence, but I'm not the sort to hurry into something. I'm going to look at other options before making any major decisions. I was not delighted to hear it, but I felt we were meant to be together. So I wasn't going to give up. Over the next 3 months, about every third time I asked Tina out, she apologized and said she already had arrangements for the day or evening. As the Christmas holiday neared, I resolved to postpone everything concerning Tina until the new year. It wasn't that I had lost interest, it was more about self-preservation. I knew Tina was seeing other men, but I'd never seen her with one, and I was certain I didn't want to. I assumed that if I invited her to accompany me to a party at Joe's and she said she already had a date that evening, I could still go, but she would avoid it because she knew I would be there. Was this a case of odd thinking? Hell no. It was an example of irrational thinking, as if she wouldn't attend the party regardless. I was a college student with a 3.78 GPA, and I was being so idiotic. My fraternity was holding a party, and I asked Tina to accompany me, but she said she already had a date that evening. I went alone, and Tina arrived with Jake Cochran about 40 minutes after the party began. It was horrible enough to see her on the arm of someone else but Jake Cochran. Even if you searched the entire planet, you would not be able to find a more irritating jerk. I couldn't handle it. I had to leave 5 minutes after they arrived, and Tina watched me as I walked out. I resolved to skip all of the holiday parties for the remainder of the year. It was not intended to happen. My Uncle Paul and Peggy paid me a visit, accompanied by my cousin Rachel. They persuaded me to take Rachel to a party in my college dorm. I did not want to. I truly did not want to. But how can you resist when your mother, father, aunt, and uncle are all pressuring you? Rachel asked me why I was so hesitant to go to the party. Are you embarrassed about being seen with me? No, you are really hot, and you are well aware of this. Then I described what was happening. So if she's there, please point her out to me. She doesn't realize I'm your cousin. So I'll hang on to you and see if we can make her jealous. I don't think she will care. It doesn't hurt to try. Can you guess? Tina was not only at the party, but she was staring right at us as we entered the room. Rachel noticed my rapid intake of air and immediately understood. Where is she? Straight ahead near the wall in the blue dress. Rachel looked at me, smiled brightly, and squeezed my arm firmly. I ignored Tina and introduced Rachel to my fraternity members and their girlfriends. Tina approached us about 20 minutes after we arrived and said, "Hi, Bill. Please introduce me to your friend." I introduced them, and Tina stunned me by asking Rachel, "Are you trying to steal my man?" Rachel chuckled and continued, "If you were your man, darling, he'd be here with you rather than with me. Come on, love. Show me around." She led us away from Tina. We had a terrific time during the celebration. Rachel brought a lot of attention to herself. Knowing how I felt about Tina, a couple of my fraternity guys inquired as to whether Rachel and I were involved. I declined, explaining that she was only my party date. Essentially, I granted them permission to ask her out. Before we went, I needed to use the restroom. And when I came out, Tina was waiting for me. I meant it, you know. What exactly was meant? That you are my man. If you had asked me, I would have attended this party with you. I did not ask you. Because the past 3 times I invited you on a date, you declined, saying you already had plans. I was tired of hearing no. So I stopped asking. I apologize, but I need to find my date. I walked away from her. Rachel commented on the drive home. Your fraternity brothers aren't a bunch of backstabbing jerks. Why are you saying that? They continued to hit on me despite the fact that I was your date. They are not jerks. They are well aware of my obsession with Tina, and they questioned whether there was anything going on between you and me. When I replied no, they asked whether I would mind if they tried their luck, and I told them to do so. I wish I had learned that earlier. There are several of them. I would have said yes to this. I turned the car around, and she questioned what I was doing. Going you back to the party to see if those guys were still there. When we got back, I let her go and went down to the game room to play pool while she mingled. She eventually walked down, grabbed me, and said she was ready to leave. One of the individuals she would have said yes to was Ed Katrine, and they ended up marrying. Tina called me the next morning and invited me to join her for lunch at the village pub. Curiosity prompted me to say yes. She was already sitting in a booth when I arrived. I sat across from her, and before I could say anything, Tina said, "I know what I want for Christmas." Wow, what an engagement ring. You once asked me my ring size. I'm not sure, but when we leave here, we can go to Zales and find out. I do not want to squander a good opportunity. But where did this unexpected change originate from? I've dated enough males to make comparisons, and you came out ahead. Seriously? That, combined with the prank you did on your cousin, made me realize that I could lose you to someone else. How did you find out? She's my cousin. She told me. Did she tell you? How did this happen? She spotted my uneasy glance in your direction and assumed I was upset because you were there with her. So she approached me and said not to worry, that she was your cousin, not someone trying to take my man. To be clear, I was not pulling a trick. I said and explained that I didn't want to go to the party since I might see her with a date, and that everyone was pressuring me to take Rachel. So, whatever it was, it worked. It actually worked. 6 weeks after my graduation, we married. Tina still had a year before graduating, and I preferred to wait until she finished school. But she did not want to wait. She insisted, so I gave in. I wanted a simple civil ceremony, but our parents refused. So we ended up having a full-fledged wedding, and the next 7 years were some of the most joyful of my life. Tina and I were still acting like we were on our honeymoon when a snake slithered into our garden. His name was Darren Goodman. He moved to Tina's office from the company's branch in Cleveland. He decided Tina should be with him, so he began pursuing her. Tina accepted his overtures for whatever reason, possibly because to the infamous 7-year itch. It started with lunches together, followed by cocktails after work. What Tina overlooked was that Thomas, one of my college classmates, worked at the same location as her, and because she didn't seem to care if her coworkers knew what she was doing, I was able to discover a lot about her activities. He now contacted me and told me what Tina had been up to so far. Everyone agreed that the relationship had not proceeded beyond hand-holding and kissing. The lunches were too short for anything to happen, and after a few beers and some dancing with colleagues after work, they did not leave together. When I combined all of this with the fact that she was seldom late home, I knew Goodman hadn't yet gotten her into bed. That changed the day Hal contacted me. He overheard them discussing a date on Saturday, and based on what he heard, They intended to spend the evening in a hotel room. One of the things I overheard Tina say was that she planned to come home and tell me straight out that she was going to start dating someone else. I told my father I needed to depart early to attend to a personal problem. On my way out, I stopped in accounting and asked Angela Harding for a favor. "What do you need, Billy?" "Sweetheart, I am looking for a date tonight for dinner and dancing." Wow. Mr. Virtue is taking a break from his wife. Hold your horses. When I recounted the scenario to Angie, she was shocked that Tina would do such a thing. I had no doubt Angie would leap at the opportunity to go on a date with me. Tina and Angie knew each other and didn't get along, which I discovered at the first company Christmas dinner I attended with her. Angie consented, knowing I meant to tell Tina everything about the date. When I picked up Angie, I inwardly chastised myself for not handling situations differently. I should have waited till Tina had cheated on me with Goodman. Then I would be justified, at least in my own opinion, in having revenge sex with Angie. I knew she was a gorgeous girl, but she looked especially stunning in her small black dress and heels. She grinned and asked, "Thank you for what?" "I appreciate the compliment your eyes just gave me." I'm not certain, but I believe I flushed. I extended my arm to her and we moved toward my pickup truck. We had dinner at Duke Steakhouse and then headed to Alhambra Hall to dance. I chose both locations because Tina had good friends who worked there and I was convinced that one or more of them would contact Tina before I arrived home. During the slow dances, Angie pressed herself against me and simply smiled, deliberately brushing against my desire. She was definitely having a good time, knowing she was making me on and Tina would find out. It was clear to me that Angie planned to get me in her bed before the night was done, not because of my male charm, but because she surely wanted to tell Tina everything. And while Angie was positive she had me, I was as certain it was not going to happen. Did I want this to happen? Of course. But cheating on my wife wasn't in my rules. I walked her to her front door and thanked her for an enjoyable evening. She grabbed my head and gave me one hell of a passionate kiss before inviting me in. I suppose I surprised her when I answered no. We both know what happens if I do, but tonight isn't about that. I told you what this was all about, and you promised to help me make it happen. I don't suppose I don't want to come inside, because we both know how grateful I am for your help. I kissed her on the cheek, then turned around and walked back to my pickup truck. I drove to Waffle House, drank coffee, and read the newspaper till 4 o'clock in the afternoon before returning home. I arrived home around 4:20 in the morning, expecting Tina to be asleep in bed, but she wasn't. She was awake, seated on the living room couch, reading a book. As I stepped in, I merely smiled at her, passed by, and went upstairs to our bedroom. Tina entered the room just as I was hanging up my jacket. "I smell her perfume on you." "Who is she?" "I'm guessing at least one of your buddies has already called and informed you that both of them were unaware of the woman's identity. You know Angela Harding, the pig. You destroyed our marriage for that pig. Oh, Tina, don't be too dramatic. Allow me to ask you something. How did you feel as I walked out the door?" "Tell me, Tina. I truly want to know." She simply stared at me. Her expression was filled with rage, yet she was able to restrain herself. "Maybe you've been wondering why I went out with another woman and why you weren't enough for me. Ask yourself what you did wrong to drive me away." She finally hit her limit and couldn't hold back any longer. "How could you? 7 years. 7 years that I considered to be really enjoyable, and you threw it all away only to sleep with that unfaithful guy." I grinned at her and added, "Go ahead, you're on a roll now." "What the hell is wrong with you? William? You are treating this as if it were a joke. Well, I find some humor in the scenario. Let me see if I have this right. You're upset that I went on a date with another woman. You're so mad that you're thinking about getting divorced. Is this about right?" She shook her head in disbelief at my behavior. "I have one more question for you. What makes Angie an adulteress?" "Oh, seriously? What else do you describe a lady who is dating a married man?" That raises another question. What do you call a married lady who dates someone other than her husband? An adulteress? An unfaithful adulteress? Thank you for explaining this for me. I wasn't exactly sure what to call you. Are you calling me an adulteress? I'm just calling it like it is. You're a jerk. How could you label me an adulteress? Hey, back off. I am just calling you. What? According to your own admissions, you are a married woman who is dating a man who is not her husband. You're a married woman dating Darren Goodman. As a result, by your own definition, you are an adulterer. Her face grew pale, and I noticed the expression that clearly said, "How much does he know?" I smiled and suggested something for you to think about. Remember how you felt when I walked out of here last night, and replay that experience in your mind until you see it from the other side. That's how you wanted to make me feel when you went on your date with Goodman tonight. You know, the date that was meant to finish in a motel room. But one thing puzzles me. I can't recall what I did to make you believe I just stood there and took it. When you told me you were going to date another man, I can't remember why you thought I'd be so weak as to say yes, sweetheart. Have a great time. I would have thought you knew me well enough to realize that when Goodman arrived to pick you up, I beat the heck out of him. Of course, that won't happen anymore, since you'll almost certainly contact him and tell him not to pick you up and that you'll meet him somewhere else. Anyway, it's been a long night, and I should get some sleep. I left her in shock and went to the guest bedroom to sleep. I was expecting her to follow me and want to talk, but she didn't. When I awoke and went downstairs, she was asleep on the sofa. Why did she choose the couch instead of our bedroom? I wasn't going to ask. I went to the kitchen and made some coffee as quietly as I could to avoid waking her up. When it was done, I poured myself a cup, went outside to the terrace, and sipped my coffee while deciding what to do next. Voice was an option, but it was a last resort. I absolutely adored this naive woman and did not want to let her go. If she had already slept with Goodman, whether she loved him or not, she would be history. But based on everything Hal had learned, it was clear that hadn't occurred yet. What to do? Finally, I decided it was up to Tina. If she didn't want to stay with me, there was nothing I could do. If she went on that date with Goodman, our relationship would be over. I'd been sitting there for about 10 minutes when she came out with a cup of coffee and sat across from me. She took a sip, then asked, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" "I'm not in the mood to cook, so I'll probably grab something from somewhere." "No, I'm asking what you want me to cook for dinner. I assumed you had a hot date tonight. Not anymore." When I looked up for my coffee, she said, "This morning I had a wake-up call. I awoke understanding that I was going to give up a damn fine marriage with a great guy for a fling with someone who isn't even in my husband's league. There is really no excuse for my actions. I let a lot of compliments and flattery get to my head. I used to receive the same compliments and flattery from my husband, but I eventually convinced myself that he was only saying them because he had to. Someone else had included it in his job description. It felt like confirmation that I was still a desirable woman. Fortunately for me, or so I hope, the only thing that transpired was a few kisses and hand-holding. Now, because of my foolishness, I'm determined to go the extra mile to persuade my cautious and skeptical husband that I've taken my head out of my ass. I won't say you're up against an insurmountable challenge, but you do have a difficult job ahead of you. Then I should get started. I'd like to go back inside and work up an appetite before taking you out to breakfast." "I'd love to," I replied, got up to accompany her into the home. I saw that as a good sign. Clearly, she wanted to stay with me. Maybe we can make this work after all. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.